Hello everyone. I'm sorry I haven't been around very much recently doing videos. I'm up to my neck in e-learning. I'm producing a complications course which is going to cover everything in Botox and dermal fillers. It's a ton of work. It's really a lot to cover, but I'm enjoying it, learning a lot, and I will share it with you shortly. But I've been pulled out of the darkness nearly. To do a little video on brow ptosis because sorry, Spock brows what's pulled me into the light again, and it's because there's a little video going around which has confused a few people. It's basically a clinician who's saying that we should always inject over here to avoid a Spock brow, and I'm here to share my point of view because I think that's a recipe for a lot of sad ladies in their 40s and 50s. Our most common age in aesthetics for anti-aging treatments is 43. So if you're treating 25-year-olds, this may not apply. If you're treating 43-year-olds like most of us, you must be careful of injecting in this area, and I'm going to explain to you why and just go over some of the concepts that you need to know for treating the frontalis muscle. So first thing, frontalis is the hardest area to treat, absolutely is, and the reason for that is because of exactly why we're having this conversation, which is you may cause a brow drop, but you also can cause too much lift, and it can look unpleasant for different reasons. So we've got to try and find a balance, and that's the key word, balance. How do you find a balance, and what is your route to finding that balance that gives you the most options as you progress along adjusting someone's muscle? Because everyone's unique, every forehead is slightly different, so we need to leave the door open to make adjustments in a way that is most likely to get us to the best place possible. So that's why I train in the way that I have. So let's go and have a look at that. I've got oh, look at those eyebrows. I meant to have them off. I was going to reveal them later. There we go. I'll take them off for a bit. So these are the muscles obviously we're treating. What I want to basically make really clear is that this is a conceptual, and I think a lot of people they like me to draw dots on things as soon as possible, but the reality is you need to understand the concept. So the main concept that we're talking about is about the vectors across the face, so the forces that decide where a muscle, where an eyebrow is. So there are essentially three muscles that are affecting your eyebrow. There's one that pulls your eyebrows medially, your corrugator. There's a muscle group that lifts them up, your frontalis, and of course there's a muscle that pulls them down, which is you can see mine pull down. That's your orbicularis oculi. So your muscle is your eyebrow is in a state of equilibrium that is caused by the balance of these forces. If you change these forces, you can change the position of your eyebrow. The fourth force is gravity, which is more and more important as you get older and older, and that's why this video is a little bit tricky if you start applying it to all of your patients. So let's go back to this. The concept that I tend to try and teach is that we need to think about areas of muscle relaxed rather than injection points. I know everyone loves to see injection points because it saves you from thinking, but unfortunately when there's no one there to think for you and all you're thinking about is injection points, you can make a mistake, particularly with the frontalis. So if the green area is the area that the toxin has relaxed, we need to think about this green area and make sure that the green area corresponds to the result that we want to create. So first thing is, what would cause a Spock brow? If you have a look back at Spock, you can see he's got loads of lateral lift, and then medially it looks like a drop. So heavy in the middle, lifted on the lateral side, and the pattern that would produce this would be very little treatment laterally, so that sort of shape, and too much treatment medially. So we're knocking out the supporting role of the central frontalis, and we are not treating with enough toxin the lateral brow. So what do you get? You get a Spock brow. So that's what a Spock brow is. Remember that's an important point, that there are two components to it. There's too much lift laterally and too little support medially. That's what makes a Spock brow. If I was to do that, you wouldn't have a Spock brow. You would just have too much movement. You'd have a line that ran all the way across here. And similarly, if I was to do that bit but also treat this, you also wouldn't have a Spock brow because you'd have no movement here. And that's actually what this video is suggesting that we do. is that you treat over here to prevent this lifting, and then to compensate for the fact that it might lift, and you don't, sorry, that it might be a bit heavy. There's also a suggestion that we should put toxin in here as well, which is obviously a way of lifting, but it's going to be that's a little bit of a riskier injection to inject underneath the eyebrow. Let me put my eyebrows on so you can see it. There we go. So if we're injecting here underneath the eyebrow, that will definitely enable that will reduce the chance of this pattern of injecting causing a drop, but unfortunately it's leaving you with very little options at follow-up if you have got a drop, because this has been a bit strong. So isn't there a better way than relying on that injection to prevent a drop? Yes, there is. You need to leave some space here so that you can use that as a backup plan. So we leave a bit more space here, and then we have a backup plan, because you can still get heaviness. Trust me, if you treat this area, even if you leave a bit of space, sometimes it feels heavy anyway, and then at least you've got this backup plan of being able to put some toxin here. So that's what I mean about creating a route. Like it's not about what should be work if we just try once. Like it's a journey that you go on with your client. You want to start, particularly when you first start injecting, knowing that you've got options if it doesn't work out the way you want. So we try and do a little soft eyebrow lift, not too much of an eyebrow lift, because we don't want Spock brows. And then if it lifts too much, you can add a bit more and you can soften it. But also if it drops, what do you do then? Well, you can inject the orbicularis oculi and then you can lift it again. So we're always trying to leave the door open for an adjustment later. Try and get the result with the least amount of product. Don't try and get it right at once using injections in all the places, and then you've left the door closed for adjustments later, which is what I think this video that's popping around is basically doing. Is you're sealing off your options, and you're not going to be able to make the adjustment later. So let me talk you through the way you design a treatment with respect to eyebrows, because that also comes up a lot. So the first thing to know is that a typical eyebrow, a beautiful eyebrow I should say, should arch in a female on the point that runs between the alar base and the mid-pupillary line, and that's where the arch should be. So if you want an eyebrow to lift in a way that's consistent with that arch, you'd also want it to lift along this vector. So this force that we create, that's how where you'd want the eyebrow to lift. This is another thing that can cause Spock brows, is if you lift too laterally over here, then that's the thing that shape is most likely to alter the shape of your eyebrows. So you're going to be lifting. I wonder if this will work. There we go. So you're lifting like that. That's a Spock brow, right? So this is another thing, is if you create a lift but you create it too lateral, that's going to cause a Spock brow. That wasn't really particularly made much of in the video, but it's to do with how much frontalis that you're actually lifting and where it's being lifted. So we don't want to lift it there, we want to lift it laterally. If we want to lift it laterally, we want to lift it over the arch. This is how you decide how to do it, is you draw this line from the alar base through the arch up into the top of the forehead, and that gives you the target. Now most people, you don't want muscle, particularly in this case. This muscle is quite long because their forehead's relatively on the average to large side, but if you leave all of this untreated all the way along this vector, you'll get ladders that run right to the top of the forehead, and it may lift too much. So how do we soften that in a strategic way that doesn't cause other problems? Well, here's what we do. We take the distance between the tail of the arch and the point we want to lift, and we use an equidistant point here, and then we link up these 3 points so that now you have an area of muscle that tapers off. Instead of going up, creating a kind of consistent strength like that, that's what laddering does. It tapers off, so it's going to be strongest down here and weakest up here, because remember we're going to put toxin in these other places, so that's going to soften that ability. We want now, so that will leave this muscle pulling the eyebrow out. So that will give you a good eyebrow lift. Now you don't always want an eyebrow lift. Some people, their eyebrows lift too easily as they get older because of lost fat, and some people you just don't want too much of a lift. So how would you soften it? Well, you start by softening it by injecting in the top third. This is assuming we still want to lift. If you don't want to lift, you don't need to draw this triangle, and you can block off the whole lot and just inject all of that. But we're not going to do that. We just want a little bit of a lift, so we put 1 unit just here, so there's still a decent amount of muscle in this section that you can actually lift the eyebrows with. So that's the concept with an eyebrow lift. Now, of course, if you've dropped them already, then you can inject underneath the eyebrow like suggested, but it's the wrong way round. We need to first create a lift. If it's too strong, soften it, and then if you cause a drop, you can undo it and lift it. But that's how you decide where not to inject in order to cause a lateral brow lift and not too much of a lift. So how do we prevent a medial brow ptosis? Because that's the other problem that we have. And that is to do with drawing also on these little lines, which I usually start with the mid-pupillary line. So if you draw up from the mid-pupillary line, cross the orbital rim, which is about here in the eyebrow, and keep going for about 2 centimeters. This then creates your top of your border, and you should then draw a line across to the other side so the two match, and then this area underneath here is where you don't inject. So this means you've got active muscle here that will enable you to get a support for that medial brow while not. And let me just show you what this looks like underneath. So if I take this green marker, which I started off with, and raise them up, this is where you're not going to inject now. Now that's too strong, so I'll bring that down to there. That's the pattern of a big eyebrow lift. Now usually you might do this as well. There may be something here so that you don't have lines right at the top if they go that high. So this is the area that you treat, and the pink area you can still see is the untreated area. But in most people, particularly with a large forehead, you're going to narrow that down slightly because you don't want so much of a lift. That would be too strong. And then you may put one injection at that point. So you end up with something more like this. It's kind of an M shape. Let me get rid of some of these other things so you can see a bit better. That's how I create the M shape. I create that vector that shows you the direction of the eyebrow lift. And I do this little safety area here. And then underneath that you can treat the corrugator as usual. But that's how you prevent a medial brow lift, medial brow ptosis. And this is how you prevent a lateral brow ptosis. And the two together should give you also, and this is the crucial point, I think I've already said it, but choose a strategy that gives you options as you go on, because that's what I don't like about this approach of inject here, and then in case it drops, put a little bit under there, but you don't even know if it's going to drop. You've already done your defensive measure before you need to. That's not a good strategy. So why don't we put less here? Treat as usual. That might be great. If it's not, you can add a bit more. And if that causes a drop, you've still got the space underneath the eyebrow where you can lift them up again. And that way you'll get your learning, you'll get a happy client more likely, you'll have options if it doesn't go right, and you can correct it. So I hope that helps. It's really late, and I just thought I had to do that before I go to bed. And I hope it's helped you, and I hope it's helps stop some of those questions coming up. If you find that helpful, tag someone, share it, give me a thumbs up. Comment, ask me more questions. I do really like the comments. I'm sorry I don't always respond to every single one, but I do read them. It makes me happy inside. So thank you very much. And if it's helpful, please let me know. Thanks, and I will speak to you again soon.